Breaking tonight, Canada's Indo-Pacific strategy just locked into place. Japan didn't hesitate, they committed. The stakes are rising across the Pacific tonight. Canada proposed a sweeping strategic partnership with the world's fourth largest economy, and instead of the usual diplomatic pleasantries that go nowhere, Tokyo accelerated everything. Everyone believed Canada's pivot away from America would leave Ottawa isolated and desperate. Wall Street expected Carney's trade diversification tour to produce handshakes and photo ops. Nothing more. Analysts assumed Japan would stay cautious, wait for Washington's permission before deepening ties with a country in open economic conflict with the United States. They were all utterly incorrect. Tokyo, Friday. The Kante, the official residence of Japan's prime minister. A military band plays "O Canada" as Mark Carney walks through the ceremonial entrance. Standing beside him, wearing a broad smile, is Takaichi Sanae, the woman who just won 2/3 of the seats in Japan's parliament, the largest mandate in the country's entire post-war history. And she chose Carney as the first world leader she would host after that landslide victory. Not the American president, not the British prime minister, not the leader of France or Germany or any other G7 nation. Canada. Think about that for a moment. Then Carney did something the Japanese press didn't expect. He delivered part of his remarks in Japanese. Fluent, confident, earned during his years working at Goldman Sachs in Tokyo during the 1990s. The room shifted. This wasn't a visiting dignitary reading from a briefing card. This was someone who understood the culture, respected the language, and had come to do real business. Translation? Carney just told the entire Indo-Pacific that Canada's diversification strategy isn't theory, it's operational. And what they signed next proves exactly why. The two leaders put pen to paper on what Ottawa is calling a comprehensive strategic partnership. Defense cooperation, energy security, critical minerals development, artificial intelligence collaboration, trade expansion, technology sharing, joint military exercises, Arctic sovereignty operations, Coast Guard coordination, intelligence sharing on defense procurement. Dear viewers, let me walk you through what this actually means in practical terms, because the scope of this agreement is remarkable. Start with defense. Japan is now considering joining Operation Nanook, Canada's annual Arctic sovereignty exercise. Picture that, a Pacific naval power participating in Canadian Arctic operations. This isn't just about military cooperation. It's about establishing a network of democratic nations with a strategic interest in protecting Canada's northern frontier. At a time when Russia is militarizing the Arctic and China is declaring itself a near-Arctic state, Japan just signaled it wants a seat at that table. Now look at energy. Japan imports approximately 87% of its energy needs. They are one of the most energy-dependent developed nations on Earth. Canada, meanwhile, has 7 LNG export projects in various stages of development, 2 of which Carney has already fast-tracked through the Major Projects Office. Mitsubishi Corporation already holds a 15% ownership stake in British Columbia's massive LNG Canada facility, with a second phase under consideration. Connect those dots. Canada could become Japan's preferred energy supplier. Not Saudi Arabia, not Qatar, not Australia. Canada. That's not a diplomatic aspiration. That's a structural economic relationship that would generate revenue for decades. Then there's the automotive sector, and this is where the numbers get genuinely stunning. As American automakers retreat from Canadian vehicle assembly under pressure from Donald Trump to bring manufacturing back to the United States, Japanese companies have quietly filled the gap. Honda and Toyota are now responsible for 77% of all light vehicles produced in Canada as of early 2026. That's up from 44% just a decade ago. Read that again. In 10 years, Japanese automakers went from producing less than half of Canada's cars to producing more than 3/4. While Trump was tweeting threats and slapping tariffs, Japan was building factories. Carney's meetings with Honda and Toyota executives in Tokyo weren't courtesy calls. They were strategic negotiations to expand that investment even further, to replace what America abandoned, to build the next generation of decarbonized automotive manufacturing on Canadian soil, integrated with Canadian battery supply chains and Canadian critical minerals. Now here's where this gets strategically interesting. Some of you will remember Carney's stop in China earlier on this tour, where he negotiated a deal allowing roughly 50,000 Chinese-made electric vehicles into the Canadian market in exchange for tariff relief on Canadian agricultural and seafood exports. Japan was watching that closely, very closely. According to Vina Najibullah, Vice President of Research and Strategy at the Asia-Pacific Foundation of Canada, Tokyo viewed the China arrangement with more concern than any of Canada's other allies. Japan has invested heavily in Canadian automotive manufacturing. Chinese competition threatens that investment, and the relationship between Beijing and Tokyo remains, to put it diplomatically, tense. So part of what Carney accomplished in Tokyo was reassurance. A senior government official told reporters the Chinese EV deal contains nothing that should cause concern to Japan. And the comprehensive strategic partnership they signed is the proof. You don't deepen intelligence sharing, launch joint military exercises, and commit to expanded energy trade with a country you're about to sideline. Carney was telling Takaichi, with actions rather than words, that Japan remains Canada's anchor partnership in East Asia. Period. But zoom out further, because Tokyo is just one stop on a 10-day diplomatic offensive that's producing concrete results at every turn. In India, Carney secured $5.5 billion worth of commercial deals, covering everything from uranium to pharmaceuticals, plus a commitment to finalize a free trade agreement by year's end. In Australia, he locked in agreements on critical minerals and defense, and watched as IFM Investors, one of Australia's largest pension fund-owned asset managers, pledged up to $10 billion of investment in Canada over the next decade. IFM even signaled interest in acquiring ownership stakes in Canadian airports and major infrastructure. Canadian and Australian pension funds, among the best capitalized in the world, agreed to cooperate on investment deals and pool capital to acquire assets together. Two Commonwealth nations binding their financial futures. And the personal diplomacy has been extraordinary. Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese came to Canberra's airport early Friday morning just to see Carney off. For Albanese's birthday, Carney brought Blue Rodeo vinyl records and dog treats for his pet, Toto. Small gestures that build the kind of trust between leaders that translates into phone calls answered at midnight when a crisis hits. Dear viewers, here is the pattern you need to see. Every stop on this tour follows the same logic. Carney arrives. He identifies what the partner nation needs that Canada can provide. Energy for Japan, market access for India, investment partnerships for Australia. He signs agreements that create structural dependencies flowing both ways. Then he moves to the next capital and does it again. This is not random travel. This is the architecture of a post-American trade strategy being assembled in real time. Carney himself calls it moving from reliance to resilience, and he's identified the two powers Canada must reduce dependence on. He calls them hegemons, China and the United States. What's emerging is a network, a web of bilateral partnerships with democratic nations that share values, need resources, and are willing to commit real capital. Japan for energy and automotive, India for trade and market diversification, Australia for investment and strategic alignment. And this is only the first tour. Senator Peter Boehm, a former top diplomat who chairs the Senate's Foreign Affairs Committee, put it simply: the leaders need to get to know each other, and once they do, every future phone call, every summit sidebar, every crisis negotiation starts from a foundation of personal trust. That's what Carney is building, Not just trade agreements, relationships. And while Donald Trump sits in the Oval Office demanding that every ally bend to American economic pressure, Canada's Prime Minister is in Tokyo speaking Japanese, in New Delhi closing billion-dollar deals, and in Canberra exchanging dog treats with a friend who runs a country. The world is watching, and what they see is a Canada that doesn't need permission from Washington to build its future. Look, everything I've shown you tonight comes from public data and official reporting, but the conclusions, those are mine. You decide what it means. This is Canada Next, and we'll see you tomorrow night.